Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for coming.
I am sorry, but there is no.
To our real estate seminar today. We're going to be talking with Ryan McLemore. I'm Jennifer Hargrave of Hargrave Family Law. And one of the issues that faces my clients these days is what do we do with the marital residence and trying to sell the real estate. The marital residence can be a challenge. And so I wanted to bring on one of my favorite realtors in the DFW area. That's Ryan McLemore, and ask him about what he's seeing that's happening in our real estate market. So welcome, Ryan.
Yes, thank you. I'm honored.
I've gotten to know Ryan over probably for about 5 years now, and he always has a good perspective. So the first thing I want to ask you, Ryan, is what is going on in the market right now? Can you kind of give us an overview, a snapshot of what you're seeing?
Yes, obviously the common theme is we're navigating uncharted waters. So if anything I say in the next few minutes comes off as me being the expert of what to do in the future,
for a second,
just disregard
we're getting a really
that.
bad echo, so
Can
I don't
you hear me?
know if maybe if your wife Alyssa's listening in the other room, it might be echoing.
Okay.
Seems maybe a little better. I know the technical difficulties of these webinars is something we have to kind of live with, but let's see. Let's go ahead and tell us now, and we'll see if we get any more comments.
Okay. Is it, so yeah, I was going to say we're obviously in uncharted waters. Anybody that comes off as an expert of what to do and all those things, that's kind of a interesting stance because none of us really know what to expect. But I just want to make sure that I'm reporting the news on what we see and kind of what I'd suggest, basically putting my experience and seeing a couple downturns in the economy since I graduated college. But what we're seeing right now is we obviously shifted into a buyer's market overnight. Sellers that were had their homes listed in March and didn't have them under contract, and even of some of them that did have them under contract.
For the sake of the quality of this program, because what you have to say is super important. Would you hit the reconnect button? We're going to wait a minute for you to come back in, but let's see if we can reset the sound on this. So if everybody will just bear with me, I hate that we're having these technical difficulties, but I'm having trouble understanding Ryan, and I know you are too. So do you see the reconnect?
Reconnect. Here we go.
Yeah, okay. Right back with us. Love to get your questions down below. I know a lot of people have questions right now, and this is a great time to ask somebody what you're seeing and how it's going. So hopefully that works. And I think that's great. You were telling us about the snapshot of what's going on in the market. Let's just start that over again.
Okay. So yeah, we've shifted into a buyer's market, overnight, and sellers that were listed in March and either had a contract executed or didn't. They obviously got caught in the crossfire. We had some closings last week, thank goodness, but a couple of them fell apart because of buyers financing, some job issues. But we were lucky enough to keep a few on the hook. But we've noticed over the last 3 or 4 weeks a lot of canceled listings, a lot of withdrawn listings, a lot of sellers that were looking to list end of April or end of March, 1st of April, have kind of hit the pause button. Inventories drying up a little bit. Confident buyers are kicking it in high gear because obviously the terms are in their favor. All of a sudden, and a lot of uneasy buyers are sitting tight, for good reason. A lot of folks don't know what's going to happen with their job, things like that. Lenders right now are restructuring every 5 seconds on what they're going to lend on, and I call what they have like the white knuckle grip on the money. So we've heard of some of these lenders just maybe calling your employer 2 or 3 days before the close just to see if they can dredge up any signs of hey, is this person going to have a job in the next 6 months? Is this person going to get some kind of a salary decrease, things like that. So if they detect any signs, then they're pulling out. They're pulling the plug. So But folks they're still trading. If you list now, the good thing is if you list now, you don't have a lot of competition. You don't have 8 neighbors with the same, somewhat same square footage that you're competing with. You kind of would be on an island. So that there is an advantage there if you want to list now and test the waters. If you want to wait to list, you're likely going to be competing with a lot of your neighbors when when the curve does flatten, or we have a cure that shows up on the scene all of a sudden. Then there's going to be all these folks that have been kind of sitting on the sidelines, in theory, probably enter the game now. So now you got competition, all kinds, and then buyers are going to have crazy competition if they wait, because everybody's kind of in a holding pattern, and the best months of the year traditionally are going to be May, June, July. So everybody's just kind of waiting, and some people think by waiting that might be an advantage, but what I'm seeing, it's going to be pretty crazy, I think, at that time. Let's say that it gets back to normal, whatever normal is, in May, June, somewhere in there, and then they think they're going to go buy a house and then not have to deal with crazy multiple offers. I think they have another thing coming.
What would you? I mean, there are lots of people who are planning to sell their house, right? We're kind of coming into the spring, which is the peak of the selling season. What advice do you have for people who were planning on selling? Should they go ahead and sell now, or hold, or what do you tell them?
Yeah, I think my advice to sellers right now: if your house is vacant, that's obviously a huge advantage. Folks are obviously leery of entering a house if people have occupied it. If you don't think you can buy until you sell, that's obviously a common concern that sellers have. I would say consult with a lender. You may be able to purchase on really, really good terms, and wait to then list if you can. I'd say 7 out of 10 folks think they have to be a contingent buyer by selling their house and then buying. But I'd say 7 out of 10, if their ducks are in a row somewhat, they usually don't have to. So maybe check with your lender, see if you can get out of your house, get it vacant. I think pricing is going to be key now more than ever. That's the constant battle that we as realtors face. Is people are emotionally tied to their house. They know their neighbor down the street sold their house for whatever the terms were, and they think their house is worth just as much or more. And so now more than ever, my suggestion is to not aim high and think that that's going to leave room for negotiating. That doesn't even work in a good market. So price that thing competitively. Example, in Waxahachie over the weekend, I was representing a buyer. She offered 10 grand over asking, had a ton of great terms. And we were like, man, we're going to get this. We're going to nail this thing. And we didn't even get a call back because that thing was priced probably 15 to 20 grand under the proposed appraisal value. And the realtor and the sellers did it right. So pricing is key. But if you're going to sell this, some people may be in a position where they have to sell. They, got relocated, wherever the scenario is. You've got to pull out all the stops. All the stops meaning consult with a realtor on what you should do to your home versus what you think you should do. A lot of times people think, well, I need to, change this counter or paint this color or do this and do that, which may sound good to you, but it may not appeal to the masses. So I would consult with a realtor that sees day in, day out what folks want, and do those things. And it may not be the catastrophic, overhaul you think your home needs. It may be easy things like, landscaping. It takes like a day in most cases, unless you've got some huge compound. Staging is key. You probably want to do that. You want to lighten up the interior, get rid of the dark colors. Smells, I always laugh when I say that, but that's the first thing before people even really see inside. They smell. If it smells weird, it's bad. So make sure your home is good in that category. Flooring is another thing you want to make sure. If you've had the same tile for 15, 20 years, you may want to look at lightening it up. Get rid of the 1990s gold tire, those gold fixtures, gold knobs that, some gold is kind of in right now. But if you've had those gold fixtures in your house since the 90s, do yourself a favor, get rid of that stuff. Get consistent lighting. Fireplaces are kind of a cool thing that doesn't take that long to really spruce up, inexpensive. Obviously paint, you want to paint the interior if you can, lighten it up. And painting the exterior is really big right now. So a lot of these older mid-century modern homes that have the same old brick for the last 50, 60, 70 years. You may think about painting it white, and then you'll be amazed how many neighbors come out of the woodwork. And we just did that with our house. We live in a 1969 home, and all of our neighbors are getting nervous. They're like, "Are you guys going to sell? Oh my gosh, your house looks great." It was relatively inexpensive to do those things. But if you need to do some of these projects, it's going to buy you some time anyway.
When you're
So hopefully
working
things
with sellers, I mean, as part of your real estate services, do you have vendors that you've worked with and that you recommend? And you make recommendations to people. I mean, you are
Yes,
right now, so I assume you do. But is that one of the things you do, is walk through and say, these are the top things to do to bring you the top dollar?
absolutely. We've got folks for just about anything you can think of, and if I don't have somebody personally, then I've got several of my colleagues that I can rely on. Let's say you live far into the metroplex, and I don't have the best painter in Lucas, or I don't have the best handyman down in Waxahachie or something. Well, I'm one or two phone calls away from getting some pretty good resources to send your way. But if you had to focus, if I had to sum it all up, okay, I need to sell my house. I don't want to sell my house now. What can I do? If you focus on the entryway, the kitchen, and the master bathroom, those three things are the key things that people get fired up about. Obviously, the entryway in the first 5 seconds walk in the house. People love the kitchen and they love that master bathroom. So if those three things are hitting on all cylinders, you're probably going to have a pretty good
Getting
experience
some
when you
great
go to sell your
questions, so
house, no
stay
matter
tuned.
what's
We'll make
going on
sure
in the
we have
economy.
time to answer those.
And price.
What advice are you
Can you hear?
giving to buyers right now? I mean, you said that this is flipped from a seller's market to a buyer's market. What does that mean? And who's an ideal buyer in this kind of a market?
Yeah, the buyers they hold all the cards right now. So, well, actually, the banks hold all the cards, but the buyers have kind of the sellers where they want them, because sellers are paranoid, they're scared. If they've got their house listed right now, their motivation should go without saying. It doesn't mean that you want to just go in there and offend the sellers or take advantage of them. But I think it's key that you have a realtor that is good at finessing those kind of situations where, we obviously have to represent buyers. What they say jump, we have to say how high, but there's a difference in, presenting an offer that's 25, 30, percent under the asking price. Well, here, take it or leave it, versus, hey, here's the thing. My buyer has their eye on a lot of houses right now. There's usually one or two critical conversations that could mean thousands of dollars at the end of the day, if you have the right realtor that knows how to kind of make people feel good about accepting a low offer. And there's I'd say a lot of time, a lot of skills, a lot of experience, a lot of messing it up that goes into maybe a 30-second conversation that you can have that can get you good
That's great
results when you're
advice. I mean, I
presenting
know
an
when
offer
we're
that's substantially
negotiating
lower
the
than what these
division of
sellers want to get.
property, there's an art to the negotiation. You want to always make sure you're in the ballpark, right? And that's what I'm saying, is when you go to make an offer, if you're going to lowball it, you got to better finesse that deal.
Right.
But there are deals to be made, yeah?
Yes, yes. You want to, the deals are out there. The biggest thing is you want to get pre-approved before you start looking. And I say this, I hope this doesn't come off jokingly, but lives are on the line. If you want to get in the car and you want to go look at houses, you've got to have your ducks in a row. There is no more of this, hey, I'm going to get pre-approved once I see the home that I need. Throw that mentality out the window. Do everybody a favor in the equation. Go get your pre-approval lined out so that you know what you can take a shot at. Because if you see a good deal and it's a good deal and you can't live without it, well, the chances are high that other people are going to want the same thing, and those other people are going to have their ducks in a row. So it doesn't take 15, 20 minutes. Call a lender if you need a lender. We've got resources that are really good. But get your pre-approval lined out so that you can, if you see that life-changing home that you can't live
Of
without,
course, when you're
you
going
got to
for
be able to take a shot
pre-approval,
at it
I
quick
mean,
with
you want
confidence
to
with
be
folks in your corner
forthcoming
that
with
know what
all
they're doing.
the information, right? Because what you don't want to
Go
do is
ahead.
get pre-approved and then get to a week before closing and find out you're not going to qualify.
Yeah, that's a deal killer. After you've spent $500 on an appraisal, or an appraisal, and $400 or $500 on an inspection, and your option fee, you're already in it for $1,200 by the time you get to the end of the road. And I forgot to tell you about this. Now more than ever, the lenders are they're digging into every nook and cranny they can to try to find any reason why you may not be able to make those mortgage payments. Because what I heard the other day is, let's say you get this mortgage, and 3 months down the road, you can't make your mortgage payments. Well, the lender is on the hook to make those payments for a specific amount of time. So now more than ever, they're like, well, shoot, we're not going to be stuck with this thing. So we want to make sure we are 100% confident these folks are going to be able to make mortgage payments. Where before it was still, after 2008, things really tightened up. But
People are
now I
shopping
think
for a first
moving forward,
home.
it's
Some people
really going to be,
are moving into a
you
bigger
gotta have
home. I know
your
I'd like to
your
have
ducks
more
in a
rooms
row
in my house,
there. So
and I
yeah, and then
like
lenders,
maybe a little less
go
open
ahead.
concept in these quarantine days, but we're making do. Um, what about investors? What are you telling investors these days? It seems like this might be a good opportunity if you have some cash that you want to spend to get into the real estate market. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Yes, this is the time investors dream of right now. The ones I've talked to. I mean, obviously everybody's nervous, but I heard this good story the other day for a financial planner of mine. I said, yeah, the stock market and real estate market, we're like kind of linked. There's when things go bad, everybody jumps out and gets scared. But then there's a group of people, when things go bad, they get fired up, they get excited. So if you could go back to 2012 and say, man, I wish I could go back to 2008. If I could do that, man, I would just buy up everything because everything was on sale. And then you get to what's going on now, and those same people either want to sit on the sideline and go, well, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know, or there's a group of people that are, what, I bet I can find some desperate sellers, I bet I can find some folks that are going through some things. If you ask 10 people, they say, hey, do you want to get into real estate investing? 8 or 9 would probably say, yeah, how do I do it? Well, everybody wants to be a real estate investor, but the key, I think, now more than waiting, is you've got to find the deal. Like, I don't know how many times a week somebody comes to me, or somebody gets referred to me. Hey, I've got this guy. He's got X amount of dollars. He wants to invest in real estate. Can you help him? Yes, I can help him, but you've got to find the deal, because if I find the deal, I've got people that will buy it sight unseen because we've done business with them so many times. Uh, my wife and I are both investors ourselves, so we're able to put on that hat. Which, sidebar, a lot of realtors can't do that because their broker doesn't allow it. There's a lot of liability issues, but we put our investor hat on sometimes, and if we can't buy it, we make 1 or 2 phone calls, and then it's gone. So when somebody comes to me and says, hey, Ryan, I want to be a real estate investor, great. Like, find the deal. Where do you find the deal? Well, they're usually in front of you. You just don't know what to look for, and it sounds bad, but it's usually people going through some not so fun things that can trigger the investor bulb to kind of go off in your head. People going through divorces, people going through not so fun situations, deaths, loss of job, medical bills, something happens in their house where they HVAC unit goes out, or foundation. They've got all kinds of issues that are going to cost thousands of dollars, and their credit cards are maxed out, and sometimes people think, well, I don't want to take advantage of people. I don't know if that's the best way. How do I do that? Well, the other alternative is they're probably going to file bankruptcy, or they're going to go into foreclosure, or some investor is going to come along and probably maybe gouge them at the wrong time. So in essence, you're providing a solution whenever you hear people that may be going through these things. That could be at church, could be your son or daughter's soccer team, whatever. There's people going through stuff now more than ever. So kind of be tuned into that. And then when you hear about that, you've got to now know how to finesse that. You can't, I can get you a cash offer. There's a way to go about doing that. And I've messed that scenario up so many times over the years to have, found a kind of a better way or a better approach. And if you find the deal, you don't have to be the know all, the end all be all, know it all in that situation. You're like, hey, are you open if I could maybe bring a solution to you. Are you open to take a look at it? And then shut
Solution.
up. And then you come run
you
to
know,
somebody who knows what
kind
they're
of a
doing,
negative connotation
whether
would be
it's
that
me
you're
or
taking
Alyssa
advantage of
or
somebody.
another
But when
realtor,
somebody
another
needs
investor that
cash
you
and
know
you
that
have
knows real
cash,
estate
and
investings, and
you
then
know it's an
you
arm's
try
length
to connect those
transaction, so
people so
you're
that
giving
you're
them
out of the
something
picture, especially
valuable
if you
that
know them.
is going to help propel them
So
forward. So I do think that's a great perspective. Brian, one of your Facebook, I love following you on Facebook, and you all should look up Brian on Facebook because he has really interesting tips and stories. And one of the things you did was a foreclosure when you all went into the house and you showed us what it was like to take over the home. And is that something that you do is to help find the foreclosures? I don't know if that was your own investment or if that was for one of your clients, but tell us about that story.
Oh, yeah, that was one of our clients. It's quite the story. I don't want to go into crazy detail, but the details are fun. They're fun because I'm not the one holding the investment. I'm sure the folks that own that house are, they just want to be done with this thing, and I don't blame them. But there was a situation in Preston Hollow. These things happen anywhere. It doesn't matter where you live. But an investor had bought this house and had plans to flip this thing and redo a lot of the things inside. And for whatever reason, probably ran out of money and probably didn't know what he was doing. And then he decided, well, I'm gonna, I can't make these mortgage payments. I'm just gonna violate the terms of my hard money loan, and I'm gonna lease this out. And he leased out the property to an attorney. Imagine that. And this attorney claims that his home was, I guess, destroyed by the tornadoes down the road. And he had set up shop in this house, and this guy had basically squatted. So they foreclosed on him in September, and it took until February to get him out of there. And so we helped the lender, we helped these lenders kind of orchestrate this whole thing so they could take possession of the house and get this thing sold. And I decided, well, let's just do a Facebook Live, Ryan's Real Estate Revelation of the folks basically kicking in the door and
I
the
have to say it was
deputy going
riveting.
in there to make
I
sure the
was
house was
tied to the
clear.
screen to watch you all to watch that
Some
thing
of
go
us
down.
were concealed handgun carriers. She was
You've given us
excited
some
that we were
great
there to back
tips.
her up
Let's
because she was
talk a
going
little
in by
bit about
herself.
financing. I know
We were not
Linda
allowed to go
asked
in
a
the house
question.
until she went to
We're
each
looking to
room and
refinance
cleared
because
it out.
several
But
banks are not
as she
allowing
walked in
cash out
around the
refi
corner and
because an
somebody's in
appraisal
there, that'd
is
been another
required of the
that'd have been a
interior
real
of the
interesting
home.
revelation. But
Are you finding that to be an issue? Is it, anytime people have to go inside the home, whether it's appraisal or inspection or even showings? Let's talk about the financing piece and then also kind of the going inside piece.
yes. And so my disclaimer one is I'm not a lender, so I always default to lending experts there. I obviously get caught up in the equation. The lenders are telling us right now if the house is, let's say we have a normal real estate deal going on, and the house that a person's buying is occupied, we are told to allow for more time because appraisers are kind of apprehensive about going into these homes that are occupied. So I can imagine doing a refi right now is a little challenging. I would say 50-60% of the appraisers that I've heard of aren't going into a house unless it is vacant, and even then they're kind of apprehensive there. So um, I don't know if that answers your question, but if you're wanting to do a refi and take advantage of the low rates that we still have, I would, you want to build in some more time. I'm not sure if you may have to disinfect your house and go somewhere for a weekend and then allow the
Do you know of any
appraiser to come
appraisers
in.
who are
Hey,
willing
we're
to
going
do
to be,
that?
out of town for these 2 or 3 days. Go in there and do your thing as an appraiser. Appraiser only needs typically 20-30 minutes to go and take pictures and they're out of there. But maybe that's an option. They don't want to usually go into a house if you're you're living there. Probably.
You've talked about
that's the consensus
doing
that we're hearing
deals
right now.
in Waxahachie and Preston Hollow, but I also know, because I follow you on Facebook,
I do
that
know
you have listings in
appraisers. I
Rockwall, you
could
have
maybe
listings in
connect.
McKinney and
I can
Allen and
connect
all over. So
this
tell us
person
a
with
little
the
bit
appraisers that I
about the
know,
scope
just
of
to
your
see if we
practice
can
and
skirt around some of these things and get them in
where
the
are
door.
you
Because I know
selling?
they're like everybody else. They probably need to make money as well. So I think where there's a will, there's a way. Well, we go wherever it makes sense. So my wife, I always default to her because she's definitely the IQ leader of the team. She's a former procurement engineer for Lockheed Martin. She's probably the only engineer that has ever transitioned away from the structured environment with the Friday paycheck and the awesome benefits and all that to go to a world where there is none of those things. And she, a lot of her contacts are at Lockheed Martin, and they live all over the Metroplex. And then I guess by default, over the years, I just know people, Waxahachie, McKinney, you name it, all over the place. So when the calls happen and it makes sense to, spend our time on these things, we're running. And so we're completely different than the realtor that locks down in a certain zip code, or I'm the Lakewood expert and this is all I do. We throw that out the window, and that's a lot of times people have a theory where they say, well, why, if I don't win the deal, or if I come across somebody that says, oh yeah, we sold our house last year, and I'm like, oh great, how'd you pick your realtor? And you'd be amazed on how many times I hear people say, well, because they really know the area, they're the top agent in my area. I'm like, I think that is a statement carried over from the 70s and the 80s, before there were smartphones and internet and access to quick information. If I don't know a neighborhood, I've never done a deal in a neighborhood or a city, it literally takes me about 10 minutes looking up data, stats, comps, you name it, and I will know more about that neighborhood than probably the realtor that lives in the neighborhood, just because I studied the stats that moment, that day. So hopefully that gets. I don't know if I answered the question, but at the end of the day, we even do showings.
Right.
We do showings at Cedar Creek Lake the other day. Literally did a
So
tour of that lake.
Diane
There's 60
asks,
something
kind of
miles around
goes
that
to
thing.
the practice of real
And a lot of
estate.
times people are looking for a second home, like
What do you think
Texoma,
about the
Cedar Creek, or Kings
non-traditional realty
Chambers.
companies who offer to buy your house for top
We're going to
dollar
go.
with reduced commission?
Alyssa has a lot
Are
of
they
contacts
ethical and
in San
credible?
Antonio, which
She
is
said,
where
I hear these
she
ads on the
grew up.
radio all
We
the
did a few
time.
deals
So
in
is
San
this a good
Antonio
way
last
to unload
year.
property quickly if you're in that situation?
Major,
Or
if we
talk to us
can't
a
get
little bit
there,
about
we have team members that can help. So if somebody has a need in Houston, Austin, wherever, we're all over the place. Yes, those are my favorite guys out there. They advertise on 75 1% listing fee. Oh yeah, but you notice underneath in parentheses it says, if you use us to buy, if we represent you on the buy side, we'll give you 1% listing fee. But what they don't talk about is the other fees that they charge. And so if you and I don't want to name any names, that's not advised, but we tested in our own home because we deal with it all the time. We go on a listing appointment and somebody says, well, the first thing they want to do is talk about, reducing the fees. Well, because we've got this company over here that says they can list our house for this and they're only going to charge this. And I say, have you seen it in writing? That's the first question, because if I can compare all their fees that they're going to stack up versus what we're going to do, we win every time. Because what they don't tell you on the radio is there's also they slap other fees in there, and they have to disclose that. And so what normally happens is they really target in on people who are
and then you get
distressed,
hit with all
people that
the
need that
additional
cash. They need
fees,
that
and
cash in 2 or
it
3
ends
4
up being
weeks.
a lot more expensive
And
than it would have been to
whether they
just
take a
buy
haircut
the
or not,
Southwest
they
line.
know that they're going to get their hands on X amount of dollars in 2 or 3 weeks, and that's all they can think about. So they don't care if they have to give up a lot of percentage to their brokers, because they're going to get X amount of cash over here. So they get anytime I see one of those signs in my neighborhood, I know that seller got taken advantage of. And I can say that because I didn't say any names, but they
Soapbox. All right. So talking about your soapbox, Ryan's real estate revelations. I don't know how many you're up to, like 1,000 now.
There's no
But
there's no free lunch out there. I mean, there's also discount
tell us
brokerage.
some of
Also,
your
you get what you
favorite
pay for. Like
real
what
estate
incentive?
revelations.
There are some realtors out there that get paid a salary, which is interesting to me. So, what incentive does a salary real estate agent have to be awesome? Like to hustle, to work 15 hours a day, to market the heck out of your property day in day out, take calls at 10 o'clock in the morning, 7 a.m. What incentive do they have if they get paid the same? Like, so that's me on my soapbox, but. Yeah, well, we hit the century mark yesterday. It's oh man, Alyssa tries to rein me in because I always want to go into story time. My broker, he's awesome. You should have him on here one day. He's got all these one-liners that 99% of the things that we work on don't work out. So we have a ton of stories, of things going on. And so she tries to rein me in on because sometimes I want to tell a story about something that happened that may not be the most positive story in the world. But she's like, no, you can't say that. Uh, oh yeah. So I'm getting coaching here. So one of my favorite things is I have 100%. I'm batting 1,000 if you like the baseball analogy of I go on a listing appointment and I say, okay, let's say your house, the numbers, the data says your house is worth 300,000, and the person says, no, I looked on Zillow and Zillow says my house is worth 330. I'm like, well, the CEO of Zillow sold his house 30% lower than his own estimate. So, um, so that's the number, but the data shows your house is worth 300,000. And they're like, no. And so they end up picking a realtor that probably comes in there and says, oh yeah, I agree with your unrealistic sales price because I want the listing. Well, little do they know is that house isn't, what at the end of the day, it matters what the bank says your house is worth. It doesn't matter what the realtor says. It doesn't matter what the seller says. It doesn't matter what the buyer says because the buyer that comes along is likely going to be financing, and that that buyer's bank is going to be saying your house is worth this amount of dollars. So I know I cost myself, and Alyssa does. We cost ourselves a few listings by coming in there and saying, hey, your house is worth this. I want to be done with this transaction soon. I want to be done with the transaction, and you love us versus let's list it for 330 and get our backside slapped around for the next 6 months, and then it sells for lower than the number I'm here talking about today, and you sell your house 6 months from now for 285, and you made 6 mortgage payments, interest, taxes, all that. You think you're going to be willing to refer anybody to me? Because by that time you hate life, you hate me, you hate everybody, because this process was a total beatdown in the hottest market in the country. So to tie all that together, every listing that I've gone in and I've said the number and the person says, no, I don't agree with your number. I'm like, well, you're disagreeing with the data, I guess.
You end up with a disgruntled customer, right?
100% of the time, that person takes a beating. And I watch 6 or 7 or 8 price drops, contracts falling apart, realtors getting fired, and then
Let's
finally
talk
it
a little
sells
bit because
for
one
at
of
the
the things
number
I
or
don't
below the
think
number that
people
I told
always
them.
factor
6,
in on the
8,
front
9
end when
months,
they're
a
going to
year,
sell their house
every
is the
single
cost
time.
of carry.
And then I pat myself on the back, but I made no money.
Long run.
But
and
at least I didn't spin my
that's one of the
wheels for
reasons
9
why it's so
months trying to get
important to
some
price it
unrealistic sales
well
price
if
for
you're
somebody
really
that
serious about
those
selling
are
it,
career.
right? So
I call those
what
career
are
killers. That's
some of
why
the costs of carry? What do people
90%
need
of
to
real
take
estate
into
agents
consideration
are out of the business
when
in
they're
2
getting
years
ready to
because
list their
they go
house?
through that for 6 or 9 months. Why would somebody want to be a real estate agent when they yes, and you don't get any referrals, which that's the name of the game. You want to get done with the process and people love you, and then their mom, dad, cousin, whoever, that's the gold. That's golden. So Yes. Yeah. Well, when I get one thing, if you forget everything else, remember your house will never be as hot as it is the day that it hits the market. So every day that that thing sits there, the excitement, the chances of getting multiple offers, over asking, all those dreams and hopes go down the toilet every day that thing sits on the market. So if you want to, the cost of, the mortgage payment, that's almost, when I go back and say, hey, if you'd have taken the 300,000, if you'd have listed your house at 300,000 and sold it for 300,000 in a month, that would have been 6 less mortgage payments that you made, which adds up to X amount of dollars. And then when a house has been on the market for 6 months and you're still trying to get whatever amount, what incentive does the buyer have to come along and offer you what you're asking? They're probably going to come in real low now. Anytime that I see a house that's been on the market for a while and I'm representing the buyer, I'm like, let's get them. We're not giving them what they're asking because they're dreaming, because they're just hoping we walk in the door with, with the proposal of a big fat check at the end of this thing. So we're going to offer this, and if they don't like it, we're out of here. So you can only do that with homes that have been sitting on the market. If you price it high and you're like, well, I want to leave room to negotiate, or I know my neighbor sold the house down the street, and you ignore the data, you are totally asking for it. Can somebody come along and offer you, a lot of money cash over asking? That's the exception to the rule. Yes, it can happen, but does it happen, 1 out of 100 times? Maybe 1 out of 100 times. Oh, yeah. Then say it again. I'm getting coaching here.
Do you suggest people
Oh,
do
yeah.
pre-inspection
Hey, another
reports before they list their house, or is that kind of
Another
asking
tactic
for
is
trouble
they'll
because you're
give
going
you
to have
what
a
you
lot of
want high. Let's say we'll stick to the $300,000 threshold here, and your house is worth 300. You decide to list it for 330. Everybody, buyers are savvy. Whenever we submit an offer, we have to give comps to the buyer. Hey, this person's asking for 330. The seller's in la la land. Let's give them 330 because that's what they want. That's what they think they're going to get. But then when the inspection comes out, we're busting out the hammer, and we're going to get them after the inspection. We're going to give them a big long list of 25 repairs that we need, or we're out the door. So that's another tactic that you're kind of setting yourself up for by aiming high and trying to get greedy. You end up costing yourself most of the time. That is a good question. It depends. I went to a continuing ed class the other day, and I think it was taught by an attorney, and they said anytime you get a question that you can answer several different ways, just go, it depends. Um, but yeah, it's smart. If you do an inspection before you list your house, you have to disclose your inspection to the public. So you can't, because you're going to have to give a seller's disclosure to the other side, and there's going to be one of the questions that asks, have you done a home inspection in the last 2 years? And if you have, and you don't disclose that, then you're asking for a legal trouble. So if you have an older home
Hey, Joe asked
and
a
you're worried
question
about, maybe something
about
comes, we don't want
the
something to come and bite us
shelter-in-place
in the
mandate
backside
and how it's
after we
impacting
get somebody on
appointments. So
the
I know you did
contract
touch
3
on
weeks
that,
into
but
it, and then we
since you
realize,
do
oh,
serve such a
our
broad
HVAC
region, I
unit
think there are
is
still some
dangling by a
counties
thread.
that
Oh man,
don't have a
I'd
shelter-in-place.
say
I
it's
don't know
probably a
in
good
Texas,
idea
but
to do
he
it beforehand, just so
specifically
that you
was
don't
mentioning
get caught
Arkansas.
in a
So do you
position
see a
where your
difference? Has the real estate
your stuff
market
is
slowed
moved out of
down
the
in the
house. You've
areas
already
where they don't have a
committed. I see this all the
shelter-in-place?
time. They've moved out of the house. They've already committed. They've already got that check for their home spent in their head, and then oh man, some catastrophic, foundation, roof, whatever's, and the buyers are going to walk, or the buyer just, they see the inspection report and they don't even have to give you a reason. They just say, oh, we're out of here, terminate. Now you're in trouble. So I think it's a good idea to do one before in most cases. Yes, it will slow down across the board. Even though we're still seeing buyers and investors, day in day out. The state of Texas is funny. I'm not sure about Arkansas, but I know the state of Texas is kind of funny because Governor Abbott said real estate is essential, but didn't go into a ton of detail on what that means. And then I think came back and clarified, okay, if you're a title or going to a closing, then that is essential. And then it kind of backed off, and now it's up to each county. And then there's Dallas County that's pretty rigid, that says, no showings, no open houses. Collin County is kind of loose, or limited. Rockwall is limited, I believe. And this now, if something's changed in the last couple of days, don't quote me on this. But the long story short is, we're kind of being told by all sides, hey, if you want to show houses, proceed with caution. Do not become a test case. Test case for the Texas Real Estate Commission. So everybody's kind of backing off, going, hey, if you want to show houses, you are on your own, because you are taking a lot of things. You're risking a lot of things. So if you do have to do a showing, we're being smart about it. I do a lot of try to do a virtual tour if I can. Believe it or not, people do buy homes this way. People that are relocating from out of state all the time. I mean, I'd say once every quarter since I've been a real estate agent, I'll sell a house to a person that doesn't even see it until they see it once they bought it. People go, how can I do that? Well, some
Joe
people
asked, and I was wondering the same
or
question, Joe.
we go to a property,
about
we open it up, we have the buyer in the driveway or stay in their car. We're going to go in here, open the place up, wipe it down, not touch anything,
that doesn't match
and then
the
I'm going to walk out.
And are you successful in
you can walk
challenging
in,
those?
do your thing, and I'll stand out here.
Are you seeing, is it more difficult right now? Are you seeing the appraisals, the value being affected by the current situation?
I do. I have masks. I have gloves. I have wipe downs. I don't have masks for everybody, but if they have a mask, I think if you have it, bring it, just to be safe. If the house is vacant, you don't really have to worry in theory as much. But other people could have been traipsing in there that day or the day before. So I think it's always best to do as much as you can to do our part. We had 3 appraisals come back last week. Thank goodness. They all came back at or above value. So we didn't. I feel I felt good about that, because I was obviously worried, like a lot of people were. Man, I hope this thing comes in at the sales price, because we don't want to go through that fiasco if we don't have to. So as of now, we haven't seen that. If a person doesn't like their appraisal, they can definitely ask for a new one. Yeah, we provide comps pretty. Sometimes people live in an area where there's not a ton of comps. That's where you can kind of get into a weird area.
That's
if you have
so
10
important,
acres out in the country.
One of the reasons why it's so important to price your house well, right, is because
almost 5,000 square
even
foot
if you
home
have a
on 10
buyer
acres,
who's willing to pay way above market, if it doesn't appraise,
they were pulling
problems
comps,
with the financing.
4 or 5 comps in the county that were several miles away, and it was hard to pull data. But if there's a lot of data around, you should be able to gauge what that appraisal price should come in. And if it comes in low, you can always ask, or high, comes in low, you can always ask for another one. Oh yeah, I'm getting more coaching, or you can give the comps. We can provide comps, and we're pretty good. I'll pat ourselves on the back of really digging into the comps and saying, okay, this is what your home should appraise at, even though we're not appraisers. We're pretty good at nailing within 5,000 to 10,000 in most cases of where it should come in at. So if you need that, we can provide that. Exactly. That's the rubber hits. That's where the rubber hits the pavement. So that's my key point when I go on a listing appointment.
What does it mean when you're
and
told that your house
folks
is
are
not
listening,
up to code?
that is,
when your
the
house
banks
was
make
up
all
to
the
code when you
rules
bought it,
in this game.
years ago.
Most
What
people,
code is this?
even if
The
they
leverage
have
a buyer
X amount of dollars to buy your house cash, because money is so cheap right now, they're probably going to be financing, and that lender is going to tell everybody in the game what your house is worth. And if you catch yourself where it appraises low, 9 times out of 10, the deal falls apart. The sellers are emotional and upset because they thought they were getting a certain number, and the buyer, you told me you were going to pay, and and the buyer's like, well, I'm not paying any more than what the bank says it's worth, so we're out of here. So the entire deal, if there's financing, it hinges on the appraisal value, unless you're a conventional buyer, and then you have the opportunity to, you can ask the buyer to pony up more cash if your house appraises low. But most people, especially now, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, good. Well, this kind of
Depends
leads
if
us to the
you're
next
a real estate
question,
agent,
and I
you've been
this is the
good.
last question we have so far.
Then
We still
your
have time
house was
for a little
built
bit more
to
if
the
people want
code
to
that was
ask,
in
but
place at the time
this
that
is
your
kind
house
of a
was built.
soft
So a lot of
question to you,
times
Ryan.
an
If you're a buyer
inspector
in this
has to
market, do
flag,
you even need
anything
a
that's not up to
realtor?
current code.
I
But
know that
let's
lots of
say,
people think,
let's
it's the
say you
same
use a
for
hot water
sellers
heater,
too,
for
right?
example.
They
Let's
think
say
I'm
your
just
house
going
is
to go
built in
put a for sale,
2010.
my owner's
Well, that
sign
thing
in
was
my front
installed at
yard,
2010
and I'll
standards. Of
price
course, they
it
come in now at
because I know the
2020.
neighborhood. So
They've
let's talk
changed the
about trying
code.
to do
So
these deals on your
if you
own
get a
and
new
how
one,
valuable
then
a
you have to
realtor
have it
can be.
replaced at the current code, but you are grandfathered in, because your house is functioning as designed, when it was built. So if some buyer comes along and says your wiring is not up to code, yeah, our house is not new, so it's at the code that it was built at. So what's your next concern? That's kind of how we handle that. So, yes, it'd probably be the same as trying to represent yourself in the courtroom, when you go buy a house. Because in Texas, you can buy a house without a realtor. The first question I usually like to ask people is, have you ever filled out a Texas promulgated residential real estate 1-to-4 family contract? And it's even hard to say, much less try to fill one out. So if you haven't done that before, of course you can get online and learn how to fill it out. But if you miss one box, or you have leave something blank, or you miss one out of several options on that long contract that you just kind of overlook, that could be the difference of thousands of dollars. The other thing is, the buyer doesn't have to pay for the real estate commissions anyway in most cases. So why you would not want free representation is questionable. So I there's so much liability. It's not like you're going to go buy a bicycle off Craigslist here. This is probably the biggest investment somebody's going to make in their lifetime. Why would they want somebody who does this every day, day in, day out, representing you?
Well,
Is a head scratcher for sure.
and that's
But
what
we
I mean.
get those
Here, the
calls all the
seller
time.
has
We'll have
representation,
a for sale
and
sign in our
you don't have a
listing,
realtor working on your
and
behalf in the
buyers come
transaction.
by and
I mean,
call
the
me,
seller
and
is
the
going to
first
get the
question I
whole
ask
six
is, do you have a
percent,
realtor?
right?
No,
So it's
I'm
not
just
like you're saving
looking around. So you're
money as a
driving around,
buyer.
or you're shopping around, and you're represented. I can ask you one question right now that you're shoot yourself in the foot for probably hundreds of thousands, $20,000. I can ask you one question. You'll probably show me a card, and now I got you. So because the listing agent represents the seller. They do not represent you. They could represent you, but you are, if you ask, hey, what type of financing do you have? How much do you have to put down? And a buyer, 9 times out of 10, when I ask that question, they tell me, well, we've got money in the bank. We could probably put down 15 grand right now. I don't even know them. They just told me how much money they have. Every time something like that happens. So I would be real slow to represent yourself on a real estate deal. I see too many.
I'm just going to tell
Yeah,
you, as a lawyer, I don't like to
yeah,
fill
they're
out
going to
those
get that. They're going
forms,
to get that money
and
too. Same thing with builders. A lot of times people
I
walk
could
into
be my own
DR Horton or David
representative in the
Weekley or
transaction.
Meritage or
Boy, you sure get a lot of
Dominion, or however
value
you
out of
say
a
it,
good realtor.
and they walk
And
into the
you
showroom,
are a great
and of
realtor. And
course
I'm
they
just
get
going to
greeted
say
with
from the
somebody who
comments
is
here,
head
Ryan,
over the
you've got
moon.
some
That somebody
fans
walked in their
who
office
are listening
and
today. So
wants to
I
buy a
want to
new
thank
build,
everyone
right?
for
Well,
joining
the
us
reason why they're
today. I
so
think this has
excited
been
that you walk
really
in is
helpful,
because you probably don't have
especially
your own
your
representation, and they're
time
going to make double
Ryan, it's
whammy
been a pleasure
commission on you
speaking with
because
you.
they represent
And
the
if you
seller,
have
the
any real
builder. They
estate
do not
needs,
represent you.
please make
They
sure to reach
will
out to
represent
Ryan.
you, but if you walk in
Joe
unrepresented,
asks a very
they are
important
thinking
question.
ching,
One last
ching,
question for you, Ryan.
because they're going to get you.
How
Because
come you do not have a picture
chances
of your
are high you probably
father-in-law
never
with
built a
gloves
house before.
behind
You don't
you?
know how it works. Even if you built
There you
or bought a
go.
house or two before, I get asked the same questions every time by
Maybe
somebody who's
you're
bought
just
50
blocking it.
houses and
Your head
somebody's
is
bought
blocking
one.
the picture of the father.
So
Well, we thank everyone. If you know anyone who's in a difficult marriage relationship, we would love the opportunity to talk with them. We are open for business. We are providing services. You can find out more at Hargrave Family Law, where we have resources especially tailored to the COVID situation right now. Also, I will say at the top of the chat session, I've got Ryan and Alyssa's website. And of course, Ryan, we didn't really talk, but she was coaching in the background. You do have a wonderful half of your team who's a very important part of the deals that you do. So thank you to you both. I appreciate your time. All right. That's it. Thank you all.
oh man. Well, yeah, okay. Always. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All righty. Bye.